CS403 की डेटाबेस और वो लंबी चौड़ी सीक्वल कोरेज तुम्हारे सर के ऊपर से गुजर रही है, तो टेंशन बिल्कुल नहीं लेनी। मैंने तुम्हारे लिए फाइनल टर्म का सारा निचोड़ निकाल लिया है। अब वो सैकड़ों सफ़हात के हैंड आउट्स छोड़ो, बस उन खास टॉपिक्स पर नज़र मार लो जो पेपर में बार बार आते हैं। कम वक्त में बेहतरीन तैयारी का इससे अच्छा तरीका कोई नहीं है, तो आओ यार मिलकर उसको ख़त्म करते हैं।
A functional dependency A determines B means that. Answer is option. A determines B uniquely. This means that if you know the value of A, you can find exactly one specific value for B. It is like using a student ID to find a specific student name. Question 2. Which of the following is a trivial functional dependency? Answer is option C. Student name determines student name. A dependency is called trivial when the right side is already part of the left side. Since a value always determines itself, it does not give us any new information. Question 3. If A determines B and B determines C, then which rule implies A determines C? Answer is option B, transitivity. This is like a chain. If A leads to B and B leads to C, then A automatically leads to C. This is a fundamental rule in database logic. Question 4. A relation is in one NF if. Answer is option C, all attributes are atomic. The first normal form requires every single cell in your table to have only one value. You cannot have a list of phone numbers in one single box. Question 5. A determinant in a functional dependency is. Answer is option, the attribute on the left side. In an equation like x determines y, x is the determinant because it is the factor that decides what y will be. Question 6. Which normal form removes partial dependencies? Answer is option B, 2NF. The second normal form is designed to ensure that every piece of data in the table depends on the whole primary key, not just a part of it. Question 7. If x determines y and y determines z, then x determines z is an example of. Answer is option B, transitivity. This is another example of the chain rule where one dependency passes through another attribute to reach the final one. Question 8. A relation is in 2NF if it is in 1NF, and. Answer is option D, all non-key attributes are fully functionally dependent on the primary key. This means that every column that is not part of the key must rely on the entire primary key to be identified. Question 9. Boyce Codd normal form or BCNF is stricter than 3NF because. Answer is option B. It requires every determinant to be a candidate key. BCNF is a more advanced version of 3NF. It insists that every attribute that determines another must be a candidate key for the table. Question 10. Which anomaly is resolved by normalization? Answer is option, a redundancy. Normalization is used to stop the same data from being repeated over and over. This prevents errors when you try to update or delete information. Question 11. If A determines B and A determines C, then A determines BC is an example of. Answer is option B, union. The union rule allows us to combine two separate things determined by the same attribute into one single group. Question 12. A relation with attributes A, B, and C has a dependency where A determines B and B determines C. Which normal form does it violate? Answer is option C, 3NF. Because there is a chain dependency from A to B to C, this table contains a transitive dependency, which is not allowed in the third normal form. Question 13. The process of splitting a table to satisfy higher normal forms is called. Answer is option B, decomposition. When we find that a table is not organized properly, we break it down into smaller, cleaner tables. This process is called decomposition. Question 14. A relation is in 3NF if it is in 2NF, and answer is option A, has no transitive dependencies. To reach 3NF, you must ensure that no non-key attribute depends on another non-key attribute. Everything must depend directly on the primary key. Question 15. Which rule states that if B is a subset of A, then A determines B? Answer is option C. Reflexivity. This simply means that if a piece of information is already contained within a larger group, then knowing the group means you already know that specific piece. Question 16. If a relation has no repeating groups and all attributes are atomic, it is in. Answer is option C, 1NF. This is the starting point of database organization. It makes sure the table structure is flat and every value is unique in its cell. Question 17. Partial dependency exists when. Answer is option. A non-key attribute depends on part of the primary key. This usually happens when you have a primary key made of 2 or more columns. If an attribute only needs one of those columns to be found, it is a partial dependency. Question 18. If x determines y and wy determines z, then wx determines z is an example of. Answer is option B, pseudo-transitivity. This is a more complex rule where we combine parts of different dependencies to reach a conclusion about a third attribute. Question 19. A superkey that is minimal is called. Answer is option B, candidate key. A candidate key is the smallest possible set of attributes that can uniquely identify a row in a table. It has no extra or unnecessary columns. Question 20. BCNF is also known as. Answer is option A, 3.5 NF. Because BCNF sits right between the third and fourth normal forms in terms of rules and strictness, it is often called 3.5 normal form. Question 21. Normalization is primarily used to. Answer is option B, reduce data redundancy and anomalies. The main goal is to make sure the database is clean, saves space, and does not create errors when you add or change data. Question 22. If a relation is in BCNF, it is automatically in. Answer is option D, all of the above. Database levels work like a ladder. If you have reached the top level like BCNF, you must have already satisfied the rules for 1NF, 2NF, and 3NF. Question 23. Decomposition of a relation must be. Answer is option A, lossless. When you break a table into two, you must be able to join them back perfectly. If you lose data or create fake rows during the join, it is a bad design. Question 24. A relation with a single attribute key and no other dependencies is at least in. Answer is option D, BCNF. If your primary key is just one single column, it is impossible to have partial dependencies. This usually puts the table in the highest normal form automatically. Question 25. If a determines BC, then a determines B and a determines C is an example of. Answer is option B, decomposition. This rule allows us to take a complex dependency and break it into simpler individual parts.